So once again, welcome to this candidates forum, which we're having tonight, sponsored jointly by the Athens Public Library and also the League of Women Voters of Athens County. This is one more important event in helping to provide information about our candidates and making us all part of an informed electorate, or that's our goal at any rate. And so tonight we hear from two candidates for judge of the Athens Common Pleas Court, from Herman Carson and George McCarthy. So we have a few ground rules, and I'll try to spell those out a little bit for those of you who haven't heard them several times before and got them already committed to memory. I'll let you know what they are. And both candidates have received the ground rules prior to the meeting tonight, so they understand how it all works. Each candidate has 3 minutes to make an introductory statement, and the order was determined by lot just prior to the forum beginning this evening. And so in a few minutes, the first statement will be presented by Herman Carson and the second one by George McCarthy. And questions will then be put to the candidates by a panel of representatives of the media. And they will each get a chance to ask one question to begin with. We're glad to have representatives tonight from the Messenger, from the Post, and a new person, or a new media person with us tonight from the Political, which is just online. You go to the Political, newpolitical.com, is that right? Good. That is Alexandra Newman, who will be asking one of the questions. Susan Tebben is here from the Messenger, and Will Perkins from the Post. The order of questioning by those people has been determined by lot prior to the beginning of our meeting this evening. And when those questions are asked, and when questions from the audience are asked, each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond to each of the questions. The first respondent is the candidate who made the first introductory statement. Thereafter, the first respondent to each question will alternate among the candidates, starting with the candidate who responded second to the previous question. Did you get that all right? Anybody want to repeat that for me? There'll be a quiz afterwards. Following questions from the press panel, we'll present questions from the audience. Candidates will again have up to 1.5 minutes to respond to each question. Questions should be written so that they might be answered by each of the candidates. Try to make those questions fair and impartial as possible. And audience members, we encourage you to submit questions. Some of you don't need the encouragement. You've already submitted some questions. There are several on the table here already. But if you have a question that comes to your mind during the course of our conversation this evening, just write it down, raise it up, and one of our two greeters will come and pick it up and bring it to the table for you. After we finish this evening, each of the candidates will have a chance to make a closing statement. Once again, that was determined by lot prior to our gathering today. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement, and once again, Herman Carson will go first and George McCarthy will go second in responding to those, making those closing statements. What we're going to do this evening is a little bit different from what we've done in the last couple of forums. Previously, we've invited the press to submit one question each, and then we just took questions from the audience and didn't take any more from the press until we ran out of questions from the audience. Tonight we're going to give the press a little more opportunity to ask some questions. They've managed to come here, and they're working on the clock this evening, so we'll give them an opportunity. After the audience questions, after we've had 4 or 5 questions or so from the audience, we'll turn back to the press for a second round of questions from them. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and begin our forum this evening and invite Herman Carson to make the first statement this evening. 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Herman Carson, the Democratic nominee for Common Pleas Court Judge. I grew up in Coolville and graduated from Federal Hocking High School. obtained a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Ohio Northern University, and graduated from the Ohio State University College of Law with honors in 1980. I am the father of 3 adult daughters. I have 4 grandsons, 4 granddaughters. I've practiced law here in Athens County for almost 34 years. For over 28 years, I was a trial attorney in private practice, doing both civil and criminal trial work of all kinds. I was also an acting judge for Athens County Municipal Court for 22 years during that period. As an acting judge, I received judicial training from the Ohio Supreme Court and had the same judicial authority to preside over cases as the elected judge, including presiding over jury trials. I was not a magistrate, as stated by my opponent in the League of Women Voters Guide. Athens County Municipal Court has never had a magistrate, and Mr. McCarthy practiced there for over 10 years. For the last 5 years, I've been an assistant Ohio public defender assigned to the multi-county branch office of the Ohio Public Defender, which is based here in Athens. As an assistant public defender, I have appeared in common pleas court on an almost daily basis. In my career, I've represented clients in 26 Ohio counties' courtrooms with jury trials in 14 of those counties. I've experienced a wide array of ways to run a courtroom properly and also a number of ways to not run one properly. That experience would serve me well as a common pleas court judge for Athens County. I want to put my almost 34 years of legal experience to work for you as common pleas court judge to give back to the county where I grew up and where we raised our 3 daughters. As judge, I will personally hear all final contested child custody hearings, and in other selected domestic relations cases, we'll also hear those rather than refer them to a magistrate. I will also endeavor to keep a current docket. The number of overdue cases on Judge McCarthy's docket has doubled since the time he was appointed by Governor Kasich. As of September 30th, 15.38% of the caseload on that docket was overdue under those guidelines. This means that approximately 1 out of every 7 cases is overdue. I will work to eliminate delinquent cases and maintain a current docket. I have the experience, judicial training, and temperament to be a very good common pleas court judge, and I ask for your support and vote on November 4th. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Herman. And now, George McCarthy, your opportunity for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm George McCarthy, current judge of the Athens Common Pleas Court. I've been judge since last year, selected to replace Judge Michael Ward, who retired. Prior to being judge in the Common Pleas Court, I was a partner in Malika Goss, Sloan, Siller, and McCarthy for about 10 years, where I was a litigator. I also have multi-county experience covering about a 14-county jurisdiction in order to, in my duties there, handling a wide variety of cases, both civil and criminal. I did criminal defense, personal injury cases, real estate cases, probate cases, trust matters, contract, and a variety of other cases. I also did a bunch of divorce cases, which I'm surprised my candidate has already indicated that what he's going to do with particular kinds of cases, because being 10 years in the domestic relations court, I never had a case against Mr. Carson. I wasn't even aware that he did such cases since I hadn't seen him up there or been against him in any divorce or child custody matters. Before that, I was a prosecutor with the city prosecutor's office. That was a full-time position, not a part-time position. I know my opponent makes allusions or makes reference to being a prosecutor in some of his campaign literature. However, he was a village solicitor, which is a part-time position. He did do that for a number of years. I was a full-time prosecutor in the city prosecutor's office. I also was an assistant county prosecutor prior to that. I am surprised to hear that that Herman is talking about overdue cases on my particular docket. As he's fully aware, I inherited my docket from Judge Ward, and there were a number of overdue cases on it at the time I took possession of it. From a year-to-year basis, I reviewed the docket, and in fact, it's not very much overdue from where it was in the previous period, so I think it's slightly misleading as to what's asserted by my opponent. Further, I can't believe Mr. Carson is actually throwing rocks in that regard, because a review of the docket indicates that a lot of the cases that have been continued are from his office, from the public defender's office, criminal cases that have been extended at his request or at his office's request, which he is in charge of. The thing I find amazing with the whole thing is that Mr. Carson has been, I believe, in the public defender's office since 2009. So Mr. Carson has had direct influence over the control of cases, at least the ones that he personally handles, and recently with the ones that, because he's now in charge of the office, the ones he's responsible for. So I don't believe that's totally accurate. As far as him being an acting judge, that's more of like being a substitute teacher, folks. He claims to have 22 years of acting judge experience. He did not make his livelihood as an acting judge. He was a fill-in judge. He was one of 3 or 4 people that were available. So he wasn't even the only one who was being called. So I don't think that's being totally forthcoming as far as his judicial experience, other than he did cover a breadth of period for the time he was indicated. How's that?
Thank you, George. We'll turn now to members of the press to ask a question each, and you will each have 1.5 minutes to respond to these questions. And as is indicated, Herman, you will go first again, and then George, and then the next question we'll reverse it, and George, you'll go first, and then Herman.
And Herman won the toss. That's why we're going in this order, just saying that.
Yeah, that's what I say. It was all decided by lot ahead of time. So that's that. We're not doing this because we're not just doing it alphabetically. The first question will be asked by Will Perkins, who is here from the Post. Thank you, Will, for being here.
Thank you. So my question for you is, why should students vote for you in this election?
Well, students, when they become before the court, will want fairness and to be treated with respect. I think those are both qualities that I offer. They are qualities also that my opponent would offer to them. It's a court that rarely students would come into contact with in most cases. But I think that knowing that whoever they come before will treat them with fairness and respect should be the benchmark of what they should expect and what they should receive if they have the probably misfortune to make it into that court.
Thank you. Okay, George.
Go. Being in the city prosecutor's office for 10 years, I think I have more contact with the student population than Mr. Carson would have. During that time, I saw 10 Halloweens. I did 10 arraignments on Saturdays, which is the only Saturday arraignments we did for Halloween, or Saturday arraignments we did during the year. I saw a lot of students come through, and believe it or not, most of the students who came through on Halloween were not OU students. The OU student population basically stays out of trouble during that time, so I think they're unfairly characterized as being part of the arrests or part of the problem on Halloween. They're generally well behaved. During the 10 years I've been with the prosecutor's office, I have been instrumental in getting established things that help students along the way. I helped establish the diversion program. I was the one who went to Judge Bennett with the idea for the diversion program in the early 90s. Part of the reason you have the diversion program available is because I thought it was a better way to handle students with underage drinking, to give them the benefit of a second chance. Plus, with the second chance program, I advanced that as well. I've been on the coalition advocating responsible drinking decisions with Ohio University, so I participated with Ohio University as well, trying to give students an alternative to and dealing with the problem with binge drinking consumption. I was with the Binge Drinking Prevention Coalition before that, so I think my service to the university and the students is shown with what I've done over the past 10 years or 20 years now.
Okay, thank you. And now the next question will be asked by Susan Tevins, who's here from the Athens Messenger. Welcome. Glad to have you here, Susan.
Glad to be here.
And excuse me, just George, you will respond first on this one.
It seems like you read my mind. I had this question written down, but I wanted to ask, do you believe that efficiency needs to be improved in the courthouse in terms of court cases? And if you do, what specific steps would you take if elected to improve efficiency within the courthouse?
Well, we've already tried to address that because I have the same concerns that Mr. Carson has, being overdue cases. As an attorney, we don't like to see overdue cases. However, I don't think that is a reason to trample people's rights in order to clear your docket, in order to get a zero sum on a sheet that we submit on a monthly basis. We track our reporting on a monthly basis on items such as this, and we have to account for all the cases we have. So it's no big secret how many cases we have. In fact, it's very common. I will point out that I have a third less cases than Judge Goldsberry has on his docket that are overdue. So if my opponent had a problem with the number of cases that he wanted to address, perhaps he should have ran for Judge Goldsberry's seat so he could attack that. Because the amount of cases on the overtime list are not uncommon across the state of Ohio. There's about a 10% float that is common across from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And again, I don't think, continuances from his office lending itself to the criminal cases that are involved. And sometimes there are extenuating circumstances, such when people plead not guilty by reason of insanity, that extends the time frame. So we deal with them on a case-by-case basis. You move the cases along that you can, you advance it quickly, and the ones you can't, you do the best you can, but you work within the guidelines that you have to do an efficient job, but fair job.
Thank you. Herman?
Thank you. As Mr. McCarthy pointed out, he did inherit a docket with delinquent cases, but the statistics and reports show that they've doubled, more than doubled during the time he's been there. But the bottom line is it's up to the judge to manage the case flow. The references to my office, the bottom line is the judge decides whether you get a continuance or not and how to manage them. Certainly I would not trample anybody's rights, but the Supreme Court in setting those parameters would have taken into account the types of cases that you have in common pleas court, the number of cases that you have. So I would stay on top of those timelines, move along within those timelines, and make sure the attorneys understand that they're going to be enforced. They need to be prepared. Many of the cases are extended thinking there'll be a better plea. Bottom line is, if they know a trial's coming, the plea negotiations will take place and the cases can be resolved. Thank you.
Thank you. And now our third questioner will be Alexandra Newman from the New Political.
Thank you. What will you do in your position to better Athens County as a whole?
Who goes?
Oh,
I
I'm
think me.
sorry, that's Herman.
Okay.
Herman, sorry.
One of the things that I would do would be to look for more treatment alternatives, more ways to address the epidemic that we've had with opioid-based drugs, starting out with prescription pain pills and then shifting over to heroin more recently. I think that that's the biggest epidemic. It's affecting families of all walks of life. It's not restricted to any one income level, any one race or religious belief. It's an epidemic that's hit everybody. So the main thing that I would like to focus on, and I know that Judge McCarthy has done the same, is to look for more ways to do treatment, to try to find money to do outreach into the community about opportunities to get into treatment earlier. I think that the lack of close treatment to home is a big hurdle, and that's something that we should look for grants or other funding to try to facilitate those opportunities.
Thank you very much. George.
I tend to agree. Herman's seen about the same cases or same types of cases that we typically see coming through the system. I think one of the differences I have is I think it does affect poverty-stricken people or low-income people perhaps a little bit more than it does. We see a lot more indigent cases coming through, which Herman's office represents, than other cases. And I think a lot of it, or some of it at least, is a lack of jobs in our area. I can't tell you how many people that have fallen victim to depression and turned towards drugs to kind of numb themselves because they can't find employment down in our area. One of the things I'm doing, as Herman indicated, I agree with him, what he says, in seeking grants and treatment programs. I'm on the verge of starting a treatment veterans court. Watch yourselves. It'll be the first in Athens County, and it's targeted right now towards veterans, but hopefully once it's established, it'll move on to a drug court for other people. I'm involved in several committees. I'm on the state Tech Committee. I go to the Vivitrol Program Committee, the Reentry Task Force, the Specialized Dockets Program, the Opiates Task Force. I go to several different ones that I don't see Mr. Carson at, and I understand we're involved in the same thing, but I'm fully invested and involved in trying to find solutions for this and find the best method, whether it's treatment or otherwise, in dealing with these folks who have the terrible addiction problem.
Okay, thank you. I think we're ready to go now to some questions from the audience, and we have several. I'm going to interpret just a little bit about this first question, and I'll read it as written and then tell you my interpretation and then see how you want to go with that. And George, you'll be the first to respond on this one. Basically, the way it works is that as you finish answering a question, whoever answered last goes first.
We appreciate it.
Okay. The question is, do you think the judges' race should be a partisan race? My interpretation of that is we don't put the party label next to judges in the actual election, and maybe that's what this question's all about, but I'll let you take it from
Can I
there.
go first?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's non-political for a reason. I don't think you're supposed to be basing your decisions on your political party. You're not supposed to be favoring one side or the other. You're supposed to be fair and impartial. I believe in that. I haven't made this a political race. I think my opponent has. All his mailings have had his party affiliation with it, and as you heard this morning or this evening, he announced his party affiliation, trying to make it a political race. I think his has been a political race, and a political race of spin, like the acting judge or these numbers that all of a sudden have come out that he's had full control of in order to assist, that have all of a sudden are of issue. When Herman ran for judge in 2003, he did an interview with the A News, and in that, he said his political affiliation didn't really matter. He wasn't an R or a D necessarily, because he ran as an independent at the time. So I'm a little taken aback that he's running this race as a D at this time. But he even said in that article that he wasn't affiliated necessarily with one party or another. I think it's something when you represent the people or you're representing the community, you're representing the community as a whole. You're not doing it from one segment or the other. You're supposed to take everybody into consideration. I think when you do that, I think you might give people the perception that you're giving favoritism one side or the other, and that's not what you're supposed to do as judge. You're supposed to be fair and impartial.
Thank you, Herman.
I believe that it should remain nonpartisan on the ballot. However, I disagree with the statements about that letting people know which political party you belong to is improper. I think that the political party you belong to shows people some of your inner concerns, your personality by the party that you have affiliated with. And that does become a point that they want to know about you, that they want to know as much about you as they can. It's true that I ran as an independent 11 years ago, I guess it would be now. At that time, I'd never been politically active, had never sought office. Mr. McCarthy and I share the fact that we lost in our first race. He did his for county prosecutor a number of years ago, which is a partisan race where he ran as the Republican candidate. So while it remains nonpartisan on the ballot, I think that your party affiliation is reflective of many things, including deeply held core values which guide all of us through our lives. Thank you.
Thank you, and I have a second question from the audience, and before I read it, I just want to thank the audience members not only for submitting the questions, but for submitting them in a legible fashion. It's a great help to the screeners and to this moderator sitting here. Thank you. This question, let's see, Herman, you go first on this. What role, if any, would mediation have in your court?
Mediation would play a part. I believe that there are particularly emotionally charged cases, such as domestic relations. The first 15 years of my practice, I literally did hundreds of divorces during that time span. Worked away from that as I began to do other types of civil litigation and more intensive criminal work. But mediation, I think, is especially helpful in situations where there is an emotional or a conflict between the parties, that you need somebody who's trained to help diffuse that and help them see what the real issues are, which frequently is the best interest of their children. Occasionally, mediation, I participated when I did personal injury work. I didn't find it to be as helpful there, although occasionally it did assist the parties in seeing through a neutral person the strengths or weaknesses of the other opponent's position.
Okay, and thank you very much. George?
We currently have a mediation program in place that we basically use predominantly for foreclosure cases to try to help people retain their properties if possible, where we match people with the banks that are foreclosing against them. We do use it for the other types of cases. We use it for divorce cases, children custody cases, other cases where we think the parties may not have a full understanding of where they are and possible resolutions that might be worked out instead of fully litigating their case, especially in divorce cases where sometimes there are hard feelings getting in the way of a fair resolution. So we already use that. It is not grant, but it is funding dependent. We have people that we secure for mediation. A lot of our cases, personal injury cases, do go through mediation. So it's something, and I was trained I had mediation training as well, so I've participated and I've run mediations. So I'm a big proponent of mediations. I think they can be very, very helpful, and I think they're worthwhile, and if possible, would like to expand them.
Okay, thank you, sir. I have two questions here that I'm going to toss out to you, and both of them together. And George, you get to go first, and you can deal with them sort of as separate questions if you wish, but or might want to take them together. One is, do you think there should be a separate drug court? And the other question is, do you favor lighter sentences for marijuana users?
Well, that's a tough one to ask from a policy consideration standpoint.
True.
So I don't know whether it's appropriate because it shows bias one way or the other when looking at, because there's so many factors that you have to consider besides the charge, underlying charge itself. I can tell you we don't see very many marijuana cases coming through common police court anymore. It's heroin, meth, Molly, controlled substance analogs. We don't see much marijuana anymore. It's just fallen by the wayside. You get that in municipal court. What was the other part of the question? I'm sorry.
Do you think there should be a separate drug court?
Oh, drug court? I think it would probably be helpful. I've spoken to people who run the drug courts, and the veterans courts are tied into specialized dockets, much in the same way. I think it's helpful because if you look at the addiction cycle and what people are involved with, it's one thing to keep them in a program for 6 months or a year, but the addiction cycle usually goes on for several years, and they require monitoring afterwards, even after their treatment period is over, if you want to keep them out of recidivism and keep them out of the courts, and to be successful with them. Unfortunately, it's a long-term goal. It's not just a matter of making them do a 6-month program, stamping their hand, and they're done. Unfortunately, it's not that clean. It doesn't work that way. Otherwise, life would be a lot easier.
Okay, thanks. Herman?
Well, I agree that we can't really speak to the marijuana issue since it is a policy issue and one that really is beyond the scope of the judiciary's function. With respect to drug courts, I favor anything that would provide additional treatment and follow-up for people who have struggled with addiction and continue to struggle with it. One of the biggest hurdles I see to drug court is economic and transportation related. Both George and I see many cases that come through court. People on community control struggle to even make it to their appointments with their community control officer because of lack of reliable transportation, lack of just a means to get there. And so we would have to couple it, I think, for it to be successful with a way to make sure that it doesn't continue or increase the burden that many of these people are struggling with to get out of addiction. Other than that, I think the drug court has a very solid basis and has some great success stories where they do have the programs implemented and are able to address those kind of concerns.
Okay, thank you. And you get to answer this question, and after this question, we'll head back to the press corps over there for a second round. What consideration, if any, should a judge give to a person's, or it says here a party's, I think that means a person's mental health during a proceeding and sentencing?
Well, I think that it is one of many factors, but is one that needs to be probably elevated above where traditionally it may have been. As we've gotten more insight into mental health, mental illness issues, we see that more and more they're a component of the conduct that bring people into court. So I am in favor of considering that very seriously or very high on the list of things that you look at. Many people without their mental health component or the disease diagnosis, they would never be near a courthouse. It is only in trying to deal with that, oftentimes through self-medication, that brings them in contact with law enforcement. So I think that it does need to be considered, and certainly conditions of probation or community control, as it's now labeled, tailored to incorporate treatment and follow-up.
Okay, thank you. George?
I think I agree with Herman on this point as far as, I think it needs to be identified as early as possible. I know, if you don't know, a couple of weeks ago was National Mental Health Week, so I participated in a couple of events, once put on by the National Alliance of Mental Illness, and they had statistics I had not seen before. One of them was 1 in 4 adults, approximately 61.5 million Americans, experiences mental illness in a given year. Now, granted, that expands, that's not traditional mental illness like you might think of schizophrenia, but includes major depression or bipolar disorder. We get people in the criminal system abusing drugs a lot of the time because they are diagnosed with mental health issues. So it's something that we do have to address and identify at the forefront. It's one of the reasons why I'm a proponent of the Veterans Court, because you have individuals coming back from serving overseas with combat-related illnesses, mental health illnesses, post-traumatic stress syndrome, traumatic brain injury, and their mental health issues are just as serious as other things that are going on, and in fact it complicates it. So if you can get a handle on the mental health issue, it certainly goes a long way to controlling any drug dependency and addiction issues as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I think now we turn to the press, right? Herman, did you get a chance to answer that question? I lose track as I'm trying to look at the other questions I have.
Guidance, so.
Yeah. Okay, Susan, we go Susan, and then Alexandra, and then Will. All right, Susan, you get the first time.
Okay. My question is, how has the legal system changed since you began as attorneys, and how would that affect what you do and how you act as a judge?
George, yeah.
I think.
Herman and I basically, I think Herman goes a little further back, but we've seen so many changes in the criminal system over the years as far as seriousness of offenses that have been downgraded, like breaking and entering started off as a much more serious event back in the day in the 80s and 90s, and now it's kind of fallen down the wayside because drugs have picked up. There have been a lot of changes over the years as far as rules and more procedural items built in. Sentencing has changed a number of times, both at the misdemeanor and felony level. And I was on one of the committees when Senate Bill 2 came around, and we were going towards what we're generally caught in now, which is community control-based felony sentencing guidelines, which tries to divert a segment of the criminal population at F4, F5 levels, felony to the 4th degree and felony to 5th degree levels, back into the community. And that's what we've been trying to absorb the last, I don't know how many years, approximately 10 years. And that's why we're going to treatment-based for those folks, because our criminal population is out of control at about 55,000 in our prison system right now, for a system I think that was designed for about 34,000. So, and I know Herman knows that because he deals with it from his side as well. So we've seen a divergent. They're looking to lessen the criminal population in the prison now, and a lot of the changes that we've seen have revolved around that.
Thank you. Herman, your turn.
Thank you. I would agree with George that the change in the way crime is looked at, especially in terms of punishment, is probably the biggest change. The legislature has done two things primarily, it appears to me. They've greatly complicated the sentencing structure. They gave us one feature, post-release control. The judge, Judge McCarthy, Judge Goldsberry, have to make sure our clients understand it. And it took somewhere between 8 and 10 years for lawyers in the courts to figure out what post-release control was. So they've greatly complicated it. But probably the biggest hurdle, I think, that we see day to day at the courthouse is that the state, like many things, has shifted a lot of the responsibility back locally, but not given us any money to deal with it. We have the mandatory community control for first offenders, and certainly I don't advocate that they should be going to prison, but they've given us no money to provide treatment for them, education, job training, the things that I think everybody in the room agrees would help lessen the number of people involved in criminal justice, and particularly those lower level offenses, many of which are driven by poverty, lack of opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, Alexandra, you get your second time, and Herman, you get to go first.
Alrighty. What positive quality do you possess that will help you with your ability to be a good fit for this position? And then to counter that, what negative quality do you have that you'll need to overcome in this position?
Positive quality, I think that, or I know that I'm a caring individual. I look at people as individuals in every circumstance to understand what brings them into court. Probably a negative, or some people will see it as a negative, particularly some lawyers, is I'm a morning person. I will start court early, and I'll expect people to be there on time and ready to go. And that, I'm sure, will be perceived as a negative by certain people.
Okay, thank you. George?
I have that same philosophy about starting court early. It just doesn't happen. I can't get Herman's guys there necessarily on time. But to be fair, they get there when the prosecutors get there and they talk about cases that are assigned times. But I'm a stickler like Herman is. I would prefer things to start on time on a regular basis. It just doesn't always happen. What was the question again? I'm sorry, Amanda.
What positive quality?
Positive.
Yes.
Positive is that I'm highly organized and heavily involved in things. I don't do things halfway. I'm involved in a lot of community projects. I don't do them to dabble in them. I do them to get involved. I think I've shown I've done that already. I've been involved in the opiates symposiums and gone to Columbus trying to find out as much as I can about viable treatment alternatives and whatnot. So I think that's a positive for me, is that I like to be involved and like to get the most out of it for the benefit of the people that I'm serving. And like Herman, I like to look at people as an individual basis. I don't think that you can pigeonhole people necessarily for cases, but I bring a very, very wide breadth of experience to this, which helps me out not only on the criminal side, but it's a civil side. It's a civil side that can slam you to a dead halt. And I have a wide-based experience that's helped me get through all that this past year. As far as negative, I tend to internalize my stress, and I overeat. So I got a treadmill in my office, but it's really doubling as a coat hanger right now. I'm not even. So I tend to do that. That's a negative quality. I got to lose some weight.
George, thank you. You get to answer first on this question now. Will.
All right. So my question is, both of you clearly have many years of experience as attorneys. How do you think that your experience differs from your opponents, and how do you think that helps you in this campaign?
Well, I've got a very wide civil-based experience for over a decade in handling a lot of divorce cases, which we have a magistrate assigned full-time for divorce cases and child custody cases. However, when those cases get to me as a judge on objections, I'm able to deal with them on a quicker basis than I think the court's seen previously, because I have that experience. The biggest difference between Herman and I like Herman, we've known each other for years, is that Herman's chosen a path that's brought him through the public defender's office. I chose a path that brought me through the prosecutor's office. So right, wrong, or indifferent, both officers are highly valued and highly needed in our society. But as a prosecutor, I've had the community's interests at heart, not my own personal interests, not my own personal agenda. Herman, on the other hand, has to represent his clients individually, one at a time, and give them the best representation he can in order to try to get the lessest sentence or get them off from a crime. So I've been prosecuting murder and drug case, serious drug cases. Herman's been defending murder and drug cases for this time. And he's done death penalty cases as well. It's just that division that I think I've had to have the community at heart as a whole when executing my duties as a prosecutor over 12 years or whatever it's been, that kind of differentiate the two of us as far as our different philosophies and what we have to do in our separate offices.
Okay, Herman, it's your minute and a half now.
All right, thank you. During the 28 years I was in practice, I referenced earlier, for the first 15 years I did a lot of domestic relations. My civil work in the second half of that career was largely doing personal injury work. I represented a small insurance company, covered 17 Ohio counties for them, representing primarily rural property owners. And so in doing that, I had an opportunity to, I think, really get to know the people of southeastern Ohio and to understand, in a broad sense, the people that come into court in different scenarios. George is correct that I've spent the last 5 years as a public defender. Probably the only thing I'm prouder of in my legal career is the fact that the 28 years I was in private practice, I always did court-appointed work. It is a calling to help the underprivileged, those who find themselves in bad circumstances, frequently through no fault of their own, as we've spoke here earlier tonight. When representing individuals, you do have to advocate for them, but you also, in doing that, have to show them that they need to approach life differently, try to become successful, become a part of the community, and not come back to court. And I think that I've done well at that.
Okay, thank you. I have two more questions from the audience. I remind you, you're still able to ask questions if you want. If you have a little piece of paper, or if you need a piece of paper, you can raise your hand if you need a piece of paper and don't have one. If you have a question that you've already written down, just raise it, and one of the greeters will come by, pick it up, and take it to the table. After we finish, if there are no other questions coming up, we will give the press a third opportunity if you've still got some questions ready to go over there. Here's a question for Herman. You get to go first on this. Why did you choose to run for this office?
I chose to run for, as I referenced in my opening, as a chance to give back to the community where I've grown up, where I chose to come back to practice law. When I got out of law school, I didn't interview anywhere other than Southern Ohio, particularly Southeastern Ohio, because I wanted to return to the area that I love, to the people that I love. I see this as an opportunity to help the people who come before the court, to help them resolve problems, even though it may not be resolved exactly as they had hoped, at least that they would have the feeling that when they left that their case had been fully and fairly considered and heard, and that they understand the rationale for the end result.
Okay, thank you. George?
Basically, this is where I can put my talents to work to help out the community. I can the best way I know how. And having the 20 plus years of experience that I have, putting it for the benefit of the community. I've seen such a wide variety of things over my lifetime as an attorney that gives me a wide breadth of experience. And similarly, this is my way to give back to the community. It's the pinnacle of what attorneys sometimes aspire to. I can tell you it's not as glamorous as you think it is, being the judge. In fact, it's a very solitary position, so you give up a lot. I gave up a thriving practice to do it. I didn't need to do that. But in the scheme of things, when you see the changes that are occurring and how you can help out, I was willing to do that because I think I can make a big impact here if retained and kept for the next few years to get even that much more done than I've already gotten done in the past.
Thank you. This question will give you both an opportunity to add on to that last one, comment your comments just a little bit. You both commented about your interest in the community and some of the things you've been involved in one way or another. Can you tell us more about your involvement in the community outside of your work?
Goes to me.
Thank you.
Yep, George, that's you.
I've been a volunteer firefighter for so long, I'm not even sure what year I'm on. I think I'm on 18 or 19. Been with the Richland Fire Department because I believe in helping people. I started Athens Sandlot with 4 other fathers back in 2003 or 4 to help the youth here in Athens County, not just Athens, even though it's called Athens Sandlot. We're taking kids from the entire county because we believed if we built a viable baseball and softball program, we can divert kids and keep them out of trouble by giving them something fun to do. I've spent 10 years doing that. I've coached for 10 years, various sports. I've been involved in Sandlot even though my kids have gone through the program and beyond. I did poverty clinic for 10 years when I was a civil attorney. And I've done various things where people have asked me to volunteer my time and services wherever they've requested it, but that's primarily what I've done. That's occupied my time over the past years. Was that responsive? I forgot the question.
You have 30 more seconds if you want to tell us any more.
I'll
But
just add this because I take issue with what Herman said about the stats. From what I look at in my last reporting, I have 28 cases out of 206 cases that are over guidelines. You should know 24 of those are criminal, and a lot of those are public defender cases. They're over not by a number of years, but the most one is over is by 6 months. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 of those cases coming up for sentencing, a couple that are set for motion to suppress hearings on defense counsel's
and now
request
your time
and jury
really is up.
trials.
I'm sorry.
Darn.
One of my jobs is. Yeah.
To read the sign to us if we have to.
Okay, Herman.
As far as community involvement, my children were younger. I was a coach in the youth recreation leagues here in Athens, worked with those teams. For over 20 years, I was the legal advisor to the Federal Hockey High School mock trial team. Actually, the teacher who I worked with, we lost count. It's either 22 or 23 years. Neither one of us could figure it out exactly. Additionally, along with my siblings, we've established a scholarship fund giving scholarships to 2 graduating federal hockey seniors each year. I've served on the board and committees of Habitat for Humanity. I'm currently on the board of Stewart's Opera House. I've served on the board of Housing for Athens Senior Residents, Inc., which until this spring operated the 2 senior citizen housing apartments down off of Palmer, off of Stimson Avenue, excuse me. And trying to think of other things that I've done in the community. Have provided low-cost, reduced-cost legal services to a number of villages in the county and also to the Athens County Fair Board to assist government entities that really don't have the money to pay full freight for legal services.
Okay, thank you. I've got one more question here, and then we'll go to
keep
the
them
press
trickling
in
in.
case you all have a third one you want to ask. What do you think about public financing for judicial campaigns? And Herman, you get first on this one. What do you think about public financing?
Well, I guess that's something I never really gave a whole lot of thought to, although I think that generally public financing would probably be a good idea for about any office, whether it's judicial or otherwise, because it takes out the equation of, are you accepting money from corporations? Are you accepting money from this type of segment of society? So I would favor public financing, but the question becomes, where does that money come from? Would it be voluntary donations? I would certainly hope it wouldn't come by adding taxes on for everybody to run political campaigns, but I think it would take out a component that some people gives them a lack of faith in the system, not just the judicial system, but
Okay.
legislative as well.
Okay, thank you, George.
I wish I had a better handle on what the person was asking because I'm not sure if they have a specific instance in mind. I think it sounds good on one respect. The only thing I'm leery of is boy, we pay an awful lot in taxes already. I'm not sure how it would be funded or if how it would be available otherwise. I think in theory it sounds good. It'd be nice to have people on equal footing. But the other hand, it's always the financial aspect. I know we pay a lot of money in gas tax already. I don't think they can lop it onto that. So other than that, I really haven't given that much thought like Herman either.
Okay, thank you. Okay, press, you get one more last chance here, third round if you want to give it a try. And George, you get the first time to answer a question from Alexandra Newman.
Alrighty. What do you think will be the most challenging part of this position, and what has been the most challenging part of this position?
There have been two things. One is the sexual assault cases are always difficult. They were difficult as a prosecutor, and they're difficult as a judge, emotionally to get through, and you have to put aside your feelings and be a professional. The hardest thing that I've seen come across along with those types of cases, and obviously there are murder cases that are tough to deal with above that, but one of the things that really gets your attention is having drug-dependent people come through your court who are pregnant. And that was tough. And that's tough to deal with moms who are so hooked on it that for the benefit of their kids, they can't, they have difficulty. So that's been tough.
Okay, Herman?
I would say probably the biggest challenge that I see to the position would be to find adequate funding to address situations like George just referred to. Pregnant mothers, for example, who cannot, because of their addiction, look forward to what they're doing to their child, to find the money to be able to operate programs to really get help for those people. I just see that as a huge challenge. There just isn't extra money locally, and the state sure doesn't seem to want to give us any money. They just keep taking away local government funds. What was the first half of that question?
Amanda's got it.
That was right. That was good.
That was it? Okay, I thought it was two parts. I just hit one part.
Okay, very good. This next question comes from, let's see, Will Perkins from the Post. And Herman, you answer first.
I kind of came unprepared with the third question, so I'll just pass.
Oh,
That's all right.
That's fine. They're just as happy that way.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Susan Tebbins with the Athens Messenger.
I have to say I'm glad you didn't say the challenge was talking to the press. But I get to talk to you guys all the time, and I never get to ask you anything kind of fluffy. So I'm going to ask you what your personal mentors or inspirations are for your career or for your life.
That's to me first?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I want to commend Will, as I know George will. You never find a lawyer who stops about asking a question because he isn't prepared. He'll give you one, whether it means anything or not. My biggest mentor would be my father. My father believed strongly in treating everybody fairly, regardless of race, orientation, you name it. It was all about fairness, and that is the biggest influence on my life.
Okay, thank you. George?
Yeah, it's difficult. My parents, I would think, as well, for the exact same reasons that you're brought up, at least I was brought up, and obviously Herman was too, to be fair to people, and this is the ultimate position to show that you can be fair to folks, is exercising discretion where discretion needs to be exercised, and being a little more hard-nosed when situations call to be hard-nosed. It's unfortunate that sometimes when you're sitting in this position, you have to act more like a parent than you do, or as much as a judge as you do as a parent, because a lot of these people don't have structure in their lives, and unfortunately, the criminal system provides structure that leads them there because they've lacked some control mechanisms or some impulse control that they haven't otherwise had. So I rely on my upbringing as well as a bunch of attorneys and judges that I've come across through the day, too numerous to mention, that have been so helpful and guiding. I try to take the best from all to incorporate it into the court that I'm running now.
Okay, thank you both. And We now come to your closing 2-minute statements, that you get a chance to do that. And this was determined by a flip of the coin before we sat down tonight. And Herman, you go first.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring tonight's forum, and thank all of you who have attended or watched on the various media outlets that are present. I am committed to all the people of Athens County, which is why I chose to return home to practice law and raise my 3 daughters in this community. I have the experience and temperament to be your common pleas court judge. It would be an honor and a privilege to me to serve the people of Athens County as common pleas court judge. And for those reasons, I ask for your support and vote on November 4th. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And George?
It's been an honor to be your judge for the last year and a half, essentially, since May of last year. I've enjoyed the time I've had serving the community. I hope with your support, I'd be humbled to continue in the role for as long as you would have me. It's been a wonderful experience. I hope I've given back. I feel like I've made a difference, and I hope to continue making a difference with your support. Whether you look at me as a Republican or not, or my opponent as a Democrat, I'm here to do the best job I can, regardless of my party affiliation. And when I knew Herman back in the day, he was a Republican too. So he was a Republican that did independent. So, but I think we're both here to do the best job we can. We hope we gave you enough information to go ahead and make an informed decision. I know I've enjoyed my time servicing the community up until this point. I hope you feel that it's worthwhile to continue me in the position. And thanks for the league for putting this on, because this is helpful to be informative to get information out.
We thank you both for being here, and I think we should give them both a round of applause for their participation.